Chuck Norris, The Impossible Legend. Chapter 1. The Mundane Disruption. The afternoon sun hung over Lone Star, Texas like a brass medallion, casting long shadows across Main Street. In the window of Norris Martial Arts Academy, a hand-painted sign read, "Classes daily. All ages welcome. Discipline, respect, excellence." Inside, Chuck Norris walked between rows of students practicing their kata, his boots making no sound on the worn wooden floor. 20 years he'd run this dojo. 20 years of teaching side kicks and front kicks, blocks and strikes, patience and humility. The students thought they knew him, the guy from those old action movies, the meme legend, the subject of 1,000 internet jokes. They had no idea. "Again," Chuck said, watching a teenager fumble through a spinning back kick. "Your hip rotation is late. The power comes from the core, not the leg." "Yes, sensei." Chuck demonstrated, his movement economical, precise. The kick stopped inches from the heavy bag, but the bag swung backward violently, chains rattling. He hadn't made contact. The boy's eyes widened slightly, but Chuck simply nodded and moved on. Some things were better left unexplained. Through the front window, Main Street looked the same as it had for decades. Betty's Diner, the hardware store, the post office with its faded flag. Lone Star was the kind of town where nothing ever happened, and people liked it that way. Chuck had chosen it for exactly that reason. Quiet, unremarkable. A place where he could almost be normal. The ceiling fan rotated lazily overhead, stirring the humid air. Chuck glanced at the clock, 4:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, class would end. The students would bow, thank him for the lesson, and head home to dinner and homework and video games. Then he'd lock up, maybe grab coffee at Betty's, read a book. Another ordinary evening in an ordinary life. Except Chuck Norris didn't believe in ordinary. The first sign came at 4:51 p.m. Every dog in Lone Star began barking simultaneously. Not the scattered, staggered barking of animals responding to each other, but a perfect, unified chorus of distress that rose and fell like a siren. Chuck's hand froze mid-correction on a student's stance. He tilted his head, listening. "Sensei?" A girl named Maria looked at him, confused. "What's wrong with the dogs?" "I don't know." Chuck moved toward the window. "Continue your practice." Outside, people had stopped on the sidewalk, looking around. Betty emerged from her diner, wiping her hands on her apron. Old Mr. Henderson stood outside the hardware store, squinting up at the sky. The dogs kept barking, frantic now, desperate. Then the sky tore open. It happened directly above the town square, 100 feet up. Reality simply split, like fabric giving way under too much tension. The tear was roughly circular, maybe 30 feet across, its edges rippling with colors that didn't exist in any spectrum Chuck had seen, and he'd seen spectrums that human eyes weren't built to perceive. Through the rift, something massive moved. Not darkness exactly, but an absence. A void that consumed light rather than blocking it. "Holy!" one of the students breathed. Chuck's jaw tightened. 20 years. He'd had 20 years of peace. "Everyone stay calm," he said, his voice carrying that particular quality that made people obey without question. "Move away from the windows. Sit against the back wall." "What is it?" Maria asked. But she was already moving, shepherding the younger students. "I don't know yet." That was a lie. Chuck knew exactly what it was, or at least what it meant. He'd felt ripples in causality for weeks now. Tiny distortions that most people would never notice. A coin that landed on its edge and stayed there. A shadow that fell in the wrong direction for just a moment. Birds flying backward for 3 seconds before correcting course. Someone was breaking the rules. Not bending them. Chuck bent rules every time he breathed, but breaking them. shattering them. And when you shattered the rules that held reality together, reality had a tendency to come apart at the seams. The rift pulsed, expanding slightly. Through the window, Chuck watched people on the street staring upward, phones out, recording. That was modern humanity for you faced with the impossible. Their first instinct was to document it for social media. His phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket. Unknown number. The text read, "We need to talk. You know what this is. Coordinates attached. Come alone. TC. TC the council." Chuck deleted the message and pocketed the phone. Of course they'd reached out. They always did when the cosmic balance tilted too far. He'd avoided them for 2 decades, and they'd respected that. The unspoken agreement? Chuck stayed quiet, didn't draw attention, didn't upset the apple cart of consensus reality, and they left him alone. But someone had upset the apple cart, and now everyone was going to find out what was inside. "Sensei?" The teenage boy from earlier, Derek, stood at Chuck's elbow. "Should we call someone? Like the police? The military? They're probably already on their way." Chuck watched the rift. It was stable for now, but that wouldn't last. These things never did. "Derek, I need you to do something for me. Take everyone to the back storage room. There's a reinforced door. Lock it from the inside and don't open it for anyone except me. Understand?" "But you trust me?" Derek swallowed, then nodded. "Yes, Sensei." "Good man, go." As the students filed toward the back, Maria lingered. She was 17, his most advanced pupil, sharp as a tack and twice as observant. "You're not surprised," she said quietly, "by the thing in the sky. You're not surprised at all." Chuck met her eyes. "Get in the storage room, Maria." "The jokes," she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "The Chuck Norris facts. My brother's always reading them online. Stupid stuff like you can kill 2 stones with 1 bird, or you counted to infinity twice, or—" "Maria, they're true, aren't they? Not jokes, they're true." For a long moment, Chuck said nothing. Outside, sirens were starting to wail. The rift pulsed again, larger now, and the streetlights flickered even though the sun was still up. "Some of them," Chuck said finally. "Now get in the storage room." She opened her mouth to argue, saw something in his expression, and closed it again. She bowed, a real bow, the formal kind, and walked toward the back. When the storage room door clicked shut, Chuck was alone. He rolled his shoulders, feeling joints that were somehow both 85 years old and timeless. His reflection stared back at him from the mirror on the wall, beard more gray than red now, lines around the eyes, the weight of decades in normal time. But time was negotiable. Age was negotiable. Everything was negotiable if you knew how to negotiate. Chuck Norris walked to the front door of his dojo and stepped outside. Main Street was chaos now. People running, screaming, pointing. The rift had grown to 50 feet across, and things were beginning to emerge from it. Not creatures exactly, but fragments of impossibility. A car floated upward against gravity. A woman's shadow detached from her feet and walked away independently. The stop sign at the corner began cycling through colors that weren't red, yellow, or green. Reality was coming undone. Chuck stood in the center of the street, hands at his sides, and looked up at the tear in the sky. Somewhere in the distance, helicopter blades chopped the air. News crews would be here within the hour. Then the military. Then the scientists with their instruments that couldn't measure what was happening because what was happening existed outside measurement. They'd fail, all of them. They didn't have the right tools. But Chuck Norris did. He'd been born with the right tools, or rather, he'd created himself with them. Though that was a chicken-and-egg problem that made theoretical physicists cry when they thought about it too hard. A fragment of impossibility drifted down from the rift toward him, a shard of crystallized paradox, beautiful and deadly. If it touched the ground, It would create a zone where cause and effect swapped places. People would experience their deaths before their births. Not good. Chuck reached up almost lazily and caught it in his bare hand. It hissed and writhed, trying to not exist hard enough to take his hand with it. He closed his fist. The paradox shattered into harmless probability dust and drifted away on the wind. "All right," Chuck said to the sky, to the rift, to whoever was listening. "You've got my attention." The rift shuddered once, as if in acknowledgement. Then, from somewhere beyond the tear in reality, something laughed. It wasn't a human laugh. It wasn't even a sound that should have been possible to produce. It was the audio equivalent of a mirror reflecting itself into infinity, recursive and wrong and somehow familiar. Chuck's eyes narrowed. He knew that laugh. Or rather, he knew what it meant. Someone had found the one thing that should never have been found, could never have been found, except by the one person who would absolutely want to find it. "Oh," Chuck said softly, "that's not good." His phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. The message read, "Too late to ignore this one, Chuck. It started. The beard hair of creation is missing." "You know what that means." Chuck looked at the message for 3 seconds, then looked back at the rift. "Yeah," he said to no one, "I know what it means." It meant 20 years of peace were over. It meant the universe needed Chuck Norris to be Chuck Norris again. It meant somewhere out there, someone had made a very, very serious mistake. They'd made something impossible possible, and not in the fun way. In the distance, thunder rolled across a cloudless sky. The rift pulsed like a heartbeat. Chuck Norris cracked his knuckles, and 3 blocks away, every car alarm in Lone Star went off simultaneously. Time to get to work. Chapter 2. The Council of Impossibilities. The coordinates led to a place that didn't exist on any map. Chuck drove his pickup truck, a 1995 Ford that ran despite having never needed an oil change east out of Lone Star as the sun began its descent. Behind him, the town square was swarming with emergency vehicles, their lights painting the growing dusk in red and blue. The National Guard would arrive within hours. FEMA would set up a perimeter. Scientists would take readings that made no sense and write reports that would be classified immediately. None of it would matter. The coordinates took him off Highway 79 onto a farm road, then onto a dirt path that shouldn't have supported his truck's weight, but did. The landscape grew strange as he drove fence posts that cast shadows in multiple directions, windmills turning against the wind, a barn that was somehow both burnt down and pristine, depending on which eye he closed. Reality was thin here, had been for centuries. The locals called it the dead zone, though nothing about it was dead. It was too alive, if anything alive with possibilities that normal space had the good sense to keep theoretical. At exactly 6:47 p.m., Chuck's truck rolled to a stop in front of nothing. He got out, boots crunching on gravel that might have been gravel or might have been frozen time. It was hard to tell in places like this. The air smelled like ozone and copper pennies. 50 yards ahead, the landscape simply stopped. Not a cliff or a drop-off, but a termination point. Beyond it was a gray void that hurt to look at directly. Chuck walked toward it. "You're late," a voice said. Chuck didn't flinch. "Your watch is fast." "All watches are fast compared to you, Chuck. You exist in your own temporal frame." The void rippled, and they appeared 3 figures stepping from nothing into something, from impossible into improbable. The Council of Impossibilities didn't have true physical forms, but they wore bodies the way humans wore clothes, something to interact with baseline reality. The first was tall and angular, dressed in a suit that was simultaneously every color and no color. It called itself Paradox, though Chuck suspected that wasn't its real name if it even had one. The second was shorter, rounder, wearing what looked like a 1950s housewife's dress covered in equations that rewrote themselves constantly. Probability. She'd always been the most talkative. The third stood between them, androgynous and ageless, wearing simple gray robes. Causality. The leader, insofar as beings who existed outside cause and effect could have leaders. Chuck Norris, causality said, and its voice was like an echo heard before the original sound. It's been 20 years. 21, Chuck corrected. You're counting subjective time. I'm counting objective. There's a difference for you? There's always a difference. Chuck stopped 10 feet away, hands in his pockets, casual, unthreatened. You want to tell me what's really going on? Or should I guess? Probability laughed, and 3 birds fell out of a tree that wasn't there a moment ago. Still direct. I'd forgotten that about you. Most beings learn subtlety when they operate on our level. Most beings on your level aren't constrained by having to exist in only 3 dimensions at a time. Chuck's eyes narrowed. The beard hair of creation. That's what the text said. Want to tell me how something that's supposed to be locked in the vault of never was got stolen? Paradox shifted uncomfortably, and for a moment its suit flickered through every fashion from the past and future simultaneously. We were hoping you could tell us. Me? It's yours, after all. Causality stepped forward, and the ground beneath its feet aged and de-aged in rapid cycles. The hair that fell from your beard during the Big Bang. The one you caused with a rounded house kick. Yeah, I remember. Chuck rubbed his beard thoughtfully. That was a Tuesday, I think. Or it will have been. Tense gets weird when you're talking about events outside the timeline. The hair contains the template, Probability said, her dress equations spinning faster. The fundamental code for how physical laws operate. Gravity, thermodynamics, causality itself. She nodded toward the robed figure. Without it, the universe begins to forget how to be consistent. I noticed. Chuck thought about the rift, the floating car, the independent shadow. How long has it been gone? 3 weeks in local time, but that's complicated. So it's always complicated with you people. The theft occurred in a moment that's still happening, Causality explained. Someone reached into the space between cause and effect and took it while it was simultaneously there and not there. A perfect quantum heist. Chuck whistled low. That's impressive. Stupid, but impressive. Who'd be crazy enough? He stopped. His eyes went cold. No, we were hoping you'd figure it out quickly, Paradox said. It's not possible, says the man who makes the impossible routine. Probability's dress settled on a pattern of zeros and ones that spelled out a name Chuck didn't want to read. But you're right to be concerned. It shouldn't be possible. Anti-Chuck exists as pure negation. He's every fight you never had, every impossibility that stayed impossible, every Chuck Norris fact that's actually false. He doesn't have physical form. Didn't, Chuck corrected grimly. Past tense. If he stole the beard hair, he's figured out how to anchor himself in reality. He turned away, looking back toward where Lone Star sat beneath its wound in the sky. That's why the rift appeared over my town. He's not just stealing, he's announcing himself, challenging me. More than that, Causality said quietly. He's trying to become you, to replace you in the cosmic order. If he succeeds, then all the Chuck Norris facts invert, Chuck finished. Death starts fearing Chuck Norris. When I enter a room, Wi-Fi signals degrade. The impossible becomes mundane, and the mundane becomes impossible. The universe would survive, Probability offered, but it would be unrecognizable, hostile to life as it currently exists. Reality would operate on anti-Chuck's rules instead of yours. Chuck was quiet for a long moment, staring at nothing, or perhaps seeing something the others couldn't. When he spoke again, His voice was harder. How did he get out? The three council members exchanged glances, a gesture that involved looking at each other across multiple dimensions simultaneously. That's the part we don't understand, Causality admitted. Anti-Chuck is a concept, not a being. He exists because you exist, as your shadow, your negative space. He should be confined to the realm of never was, locked in eternal non-existence. But someone helped him, Chuck said. It wasn't a question. We believe so. Someone with knowledge of deep reality manipulation. Someone who understood the architecture of existence well enough to give shape to shapelessness. Paradox's suit flickered to white, then black, then both simultaneously. Someone with access to your legend. My legend? The Chuck Norris facts, Probability said. Every joke, every meme, every impossible feat attributed to you. They're more than humor, Chuck. You know this. They're reality anchors. Observations that force the universe to accommodate your existence. Whoever freed Anti-Chuck found a way to create negative anchors. Anti-facts. Impossibilities that specifically negate your impossibilities. Chuck's hand went to his beard, stroking it thoughtfully. When he did, a shooting star appeared overhead despite it being barely evening. Old habits. Show me. Causality raised one hand, and the air between them crystallized into a screen, not a screen made of light or matter, but of frozen probability. Images formed within it. Chuck saw himself, or rather, a distorted version of himself. Same build, same beard, but where Chuck's eyes held depth and certainty, these eyes held void and negation. Anti-Chuck stood in a place that was all places and no place, holding something that glowed with the light of creation itself. The beard hair. A single strand, impossibly large from this perspective, humming with fundamental force. He's using it to anchor himself, Chuck observed. Smart. The hair contains my essence, the template of my impossibility. He's reverse engineering it, learning how to be real by studying how I'm real. Can you stop him? Probability asked. Chuck didn't answer immediately. He watched Anti-Chuck in the probability screen, saw his shadow self moving through locations that existed in the gaps between real places. The Bermuda Triangle, the dark side of the moon, the space beneath people's beds where monsters theoretically lived, except now they actually might. Maybe, Chuck said finally, but not alone. If Anti-Chuck has the beard hair, he's operating at near equal power. We cancel each other out. I need backup. We can't help you directly, Causality said. Council rules. We maintain balance, but don't interfere. If we sided with you, we'd violate our mandate. I know. I wasn't going to ask you. Chuck turned away from the screen. I need people. Humans. People who've touched the impossible but stayed sane. People who can operate in the spaces between what's real and what's real to me. That's a short list, Paradox noted. I've got names. Chuck started walking back toward his truck. What's my timeline? 3 days, Probability called after him. Maybe 4. After that, Anti-Chuck will have fully integrated with the beard hair. He'll be permanent, real, and you'll be normal. Chuck opened his truck door, paused. Would that be so bad, being normal? For you, yes. Because normal, you wouldn't remember being impossible you. You'd just be an 85-year-old martial artist with a mediocre film career and a lot of strange internet fame. The universe would forget you were ever more than that. And Anti-Chuck would be the legend instead. Correct. Chuck climbed into his truck, started the engine. It caught immediately despite having a quarter tank of gas that had been the same quarter tank for 7 years. One more question. Why now? Anti-Chuck has existed as long as I have, right? My shadow. What changed? Why make his move now? The 3 council members were silent. Probability's dress equations stopped moving. Paradox's suit settled on pure black. Causality's face, normally expressionless, showed something that might have been concern. "We don't know," Causality said finally. "That's what worries us most. Something outside our awareness, outside the scope of even deep reality manipulation, has changed. A new variable has entered the equation." "Great." Chuck put the truck in gear. "I love variables. They keep life interesting." "Chuck," Probability said, "be careful. Anti-Chuck isn't just your opposite. He's every version of you that never was. Every path you didn't take. Every choice you didn't make. Fighting him is fighting yourself. I've fought myself before." Chuck's grin was sharp. "I won." "Both of you won," Paradox corrected. "You arm-wrestled yourself across parallel dimensions for 3 years. It ended in a tie." "Yeah, but I claimed victory in more timelines than I didn't. That's what counts." Chuck revved the engine, and somewhere in Montana, a grizzly bear stood up and saluted for no reason it could explain. "I'll be in touch." The truck rolled forward, back down the path that shouldn't exist, leaving the council standing in their gray void. As Chuck drove, he pulled out his phone and opened his contacts. 3 names, that's all he'd need. First, Dr. Sarah Chen, physicist at MIT. 3 years ago, she'd been working on a theoretical proof involving division by 0 when her equation had actually solved. The solution had opened a hole in her lab that showed every possible universe simultaneously. She'd been the only one who could look at it without going mad. The only reason Chuck had been teaching a seminar on campus that day, and his proximity had rounded the infinity for her, made it comprehensible. Second, Marcus Wright, software engineer, age 28. Last year, he'd written a piece of code that compiled perfectly on the first try, no errors, no bugs, no unexpected behavior. Impossible in any normal timeline. Except Marcus lived in Austin, and Chuck had been passing through on I-35 when Marcus hit run. Chuck's presence in the local reality had debugged the code telepathically, proving that even machine logic bent to Chuck Norris facts. Third, Elena Volkov, chess grandmaster, Russian-born, now living in New York. During the World Championship 2 years ago, she'd been playing an exhibition match when Chuck had walked past the venue. For exactly 3 moves, she'd seen every possible chess game that had ever been or would ever be played simultaneously. She'd watched Chuck, in her mind's eye, win a game of Connect 4 in 3 moves. Impossible, according to game theory, routine for him. It broke something in her brain, then rebuilt it stronger. 3 people who'd touched the impossible and survived. 3 people who could operate in Chuck's world without shattering. He'd need them. Chuck drove back toward Lone Star as full night fell. Above the town, the rift pulsed like a wound that wouldn't close, bleeding impossibility into the world. News helicopters circled at a distance. He could already see the glow of military floodlights being set up. 3 days, the council had said, maybe 4. Chuck Norris had ended wars in less time. But he'd never fought himself before. Not really. Not someone who knew every move he'd make, because they were made from every move he didn't make. This was going to be interesting. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Different from before. The text read, "Hello, Chuck. Or should I call you brother? After all, we're 2 sides of the same coin. I have your hair. Soon I'll have your legend. And then I'll finally be real. See you soon. EC." Chuck deleted the message and smiled, not a friendly smile, but the smile of a man who'd just been given an interesting problem to solve. "See you soon," he said to the phone, to the night, to his impossible shadow. Then he drove faster, and his truck's speedometer stopped measuring in miles per hour and started measuring in as fast as it needs to go. Time to assemble a team. Time to save reality. Time to prove that even when fighting yourself, Chuck Norris never loses. The universe held its breath and waited to see if that was still true. Chapter 3. Assembling the Impossible Team. Dr. Sarah Chen was dreaming about the end of mathematics when her doorbell rang at 2:47 a.m. In the dream, she stood before an infinite chalkboard, writing an equation that proved itself false while simultaneously being true. The chalk in her hand was Schrödinger's cat, both alive and dead, and it purred as it wrote. She was close to something, a fundamental truth about the nature of reality that would revolutionize physics, or possibly end it. Then, ding-dong! Sarah jerked awake in her Cambridge apartment, tangled in sheets covered with handwritten formulas. Her laptop was still open on the bed, displaying a simulation she'd been running for 6 months, an attempt to recreate the conditions that had caused the zero-division event, as she privately called it. The doorbell rang again. Sarah glanced at her phone. 2:47 a.m. No notifications, no calls. Her hand went to the baseball bat she kept by the bed, a gift from her father, who'd never quite understood why his daughter would rather solve quantum equations than socialize. She crept to the door, looked through the peephole. A man stood in the hallway, backlit by the fluorescent lights. Beard, jeans, denim shirt. He looked tired but patient, like someone who could wait forever if necessary and probably had. "Dr. Chen," the man said, not loudly, but she heard him perfectly through the door. "My name is Chuck Norris. We need to talk about what happened in your lab 3 years ago." Sarah's hand froze on the bat. That's not possible." "Yeah, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means." Despite herself, Sarah laughed, a short, nervous bark. She put down the bat, undid 3 locks, and opened the door on its chain. Chuck Norris looked exactly like he did in photos, except older, more real, and somehow more present than any human should be. Looking at him was like looking at a mathematical constant that had decided to take human form. "How did you find me?" Sarah asked. "I was there." Chuck's voice was matter-of-fact. 3 years ago. Guest lecture at MIT on the philosophical implications of martial arts discipline. Remember? You were in the building when you solved the unsolvable equation. Sarah remembered. She'd been so focused on her work she'd barely registered the campus event. But yes, there had been something that day. A guest speaker, a crowd of students. She'd ignored it all, lost in her calculations. "The division by 0, she whispered. You were the reason it worked. I rounded it for you, made infinity manageable." "You're welcome." Chuck glanced down the hallway, then back at her. "Can I come in? I promise I'm not here to hurt you, just to recruit you." "Recruit me for what?" "Saving the universe. Maybe. Probably. It's complicated." Sarah stared at him for 5 full seconds, then laughed again, longer this time, with an edge of hysteria. "You know what? Why not? This is already the weirdest night of my life. And it's only Tuesday. Wednesday, technically, it's after midnight. Wednesday, then." She closed the door, undid the chain, opened it fully. "Come in, Mr. Norris. Tell me how you're going to save the universe." 20 minutes later, Sarah sat on her couch clutching a mug of coffee she'd made too strong, listening to Chuck explain reality like he was describing the weather. "So let me see if I have this straight," she said. "You're not just a martial artist and actor. You're, what, a fundamental force of the universe? That's oversimplifying, but close enough. And every Chuck Norris joke." "Fact, Chuck Norris fact. They're not jokes." "Right, fact. Every fact is actually true? You really counted to infinity twice?" "Took a while, but, yeah. Got boring around the second half of the first infinity, so I skipped some numbers. Don't tell the mathematicians." Sarah rubbed her temples. Her doctorate from Stanford, her postdoc at CERN, her entire understanding of physics, all of it, was crumbling and reforming into new shapes. And now your evil twin, shadow self, anti-you, has stolen a hair from your beard that contains the blueprint for physical laws? The beard hair of creation, yes. It fell out during the Big Bang. I caused the Big Bang with a roundhouse kick, so technically the hair is the oldest part of the universe after me. After you? I created myself. Chicken and egg problem. Try not to think about it too hard. Sarah laughed, and it came out slightly unhinged. Mr. Norris, I solve quantum field equations for fun. I've spent 3 years trying to recreate the moment I saw every possible universe simultaneously. My brain is designed to think about things too hard. Chuck smiled genuinely this time. That's exactly why I need you. Anti-Chuck is using the beard hair to anchor himself in reality. To do that, he's manipulating fundamental constants. Gravity, Planck's constant, the speed of light. All of it becomes negotiable in his presence. I need someone who can track those changes, predict them, maybe even counter them.
You need a physicist who already knows your physics-defying existence is real.
Exactly. Sarah was quiet for a moment, looking into her coffee like it might contain answers. The day it happened, the Zero Division event saw something. Just for a moment, a flash of understanding. Like the universe showed me its source code. I've been chasing that feeling ever since. You want to see it again? God, yes. She looked up at him. Is that what this is? Will I get to see behind the curtain again? You'll see things that'll make the Zero Division event look like basic arithmetic. But it's dangerous. Anti-Chuck is me, without the parts that care about collateral damage. People could die. You could die. Will you try to stop that? Of course. Then statistically, I'm safer with Chuck Norris trying to protect me than anywhere else in the universe. Sarah set down her coffee. When do we leave? 30 minutes. Pack light. We're picking up 2 more people. Who? Chuck was already heading for the door. A programmer who achieved the impossible and a chess player who saw the infinite. You'll like them. Marcus Wright was not having a good week. First, his code had started behaving strangely. Compiling fine, but producing outputs that didn't match any logical progression. Variables changing value without being reassigned. Functions returning results before being called. Second, his dreams had become geometric, abstract. He kept seeing the same bearded face, always in the background, always watching. Third, and most concerning, his Alexa had started saying, Chuck Norris doesn't need debugging. Debugging needs Chuck Norris, every time he asked for the weather. So when his doorbell rang at 4:15 a.m. and he opened it to find Chuck Norris standing there with an exhausted-looking Asian woman in sweatpants, Marcus's first thought was, finally, I've gone completely insane. His second thought was, why is insanity so weirdly specific? Marcus Wright? Chuck asked. Yes? You wrote a program last year that compiled perfectly on the first try. 0 errors. Want to know why? Marcus blinked. I assumed I'd gotten really good at coding? You did, but that's not why. I was driving through Austin on I-35 that day. My proximity to your workspace debugged your code telepathically. You wrote it, but I made it perfect. Marcus searched for words. That's the most arrogant thing I've ever heard. Also true, Sarah offered from behind Chuck. She looked as shell-shocked as Marcus felt. Trust me, I said the same thing. Then he explained quantum mechanics in a way that made my physics degree weep. He's legit. Dr. Sarah Chen, Chuck said, gesturing. MIT physicist, Marcus Wright, meet your teammate. Teammate for what? Saving reality from my evil twin, who's trying to steal my identity and remake the universe in his image. You in? Marcus stared. Then he started laughing deep, genuine belly laughs that doubled him over. Oh, man. Okay, this is either a really elaborate prank, or I'm having a psychotic break, or... He looked at Chuck, really looked, and the laughter died. There was something about the man's eyes. They had depth, like looking into a well that had no bottom. Are you serious? Door number 3. Why me? I'm just a programmer. I write code for a health insurance app. I'm not special. You touched the impossible and didn't break, Chuck said simply. Your code was perfect because reality bent around you for exactly 5 seconds. Most people would rationalize that away. Forget it, move on. But you didn't. You've been chasing that feeling, haven't you? Trying to recreate it? Marcus thought about the hours he'd spent reviewing that code, trying to understand why it worked so flawlessly. The sleepless nights. The certainty that he'd stumbled onto something profound. Yeah, he admitted. Yeah, I have. Then pack a bag. You're about to find out what you stumbled into. Elena Volkov was awake when they arrived at her brownstone in Brooklyn at 6:30 a.m. She'd been awake for 2 days, playing through chess games in her mind. Not games that had been played, but games that could be played, would be played, existed in potential. The exhibition match haunted her. 2 years ago, she'd been playing a simple demonstration game for children when Chuck Norris had walked past the venue. For 3 moves, just 3, she'd seen the infinite branching paths of every possible chess game. More than that, she'd seen patterns underlying the patterns, strategies that existed outside strategy, games beyond games. She'd won the world championship 6 months later, but the victory felt hollow. She'd been playing regular chess. She wanted to play that chess, the impossible chess she'd glimpsed. When her doorbell rang, she knew who it would be. She'd been expecting this. Elena opened the door already dressed, a small suitcase at her feet. Chuck nodded approvingly. You knew I was coming. I saw it. 2 years, 3 months, 18 days ago, when you walked past the tournament hall and I saw everything. Her English was precise, barely accented. I saw this moment too. You here asking me to join you. I saw myself say yes. Did you see if we win? Elena smiled slightly. I saw 17,000 possible outcomes. In 12,000, we survive. In 8,000, we win. In 3,000, the concept of winning becomes meaningless. I'll take those odds, Chuck said. Of course you will. You're Chuck Norris. You don't play by probability. Sarah stepped forward, extending her hand. Dr. Sarah Chen, physicist. Elena Volkov, chess player. They shook. Elena turned to Marcus. And you're the programmer, the one who wrote perfect code. How did you— She can see probability, Chuck explained. Not perfectly, not all the time, but when it matters. When you're near, Elena corrected, your presence makes the quantum foam visible. I can navigate it, but only because you illuminate the paths. She picked up her suitcase. Shall we? By 8 a.m., the 4 of them were sitting in a private room at a diner off I-95, somewhere between New York and D.C. The place was called the Paradox Cafe, which Chuck thought was either very appropriate or the universe's idea of a joke. Sarah had ordered coffee and was currently on her 3rd cup. Marcus had barely touched his pancakes, too busy staring at Chuck like he might disappear. Elena ate methodically, her eyes distant, calculating. Okay, Sarah said, setting down her mug with a decisive clink. Let's talk logistics. We're a physicist, a programmer, and a chess player. What exactly is our role in this anti-Chuck situation? Chuck leaned back in his booth. Anti-Chuck operates on my level impossible made routine, but he's not human. He's concept given form. He doesn't think like a person. He thinks like a negation. That's his weakness. And we're human, Marcus said slowly, understanding dawning. We think in ways he can't predict. Exactly. Sarah, I need you to track reality distortions. When Anti-Chuck uses the beard hair to manipulate physics, there'll be signatures, quantum fluctuations, causality inversions. You can spot them. Sarah nodded. I can build a detector. Modified spectrometer linked to a quantum field sensor. Give me 12 hours and access to a university lab. You've got 6 hours and whatever's in the back of my truck. Chuck turned to Marcus. You're going to help her. The detector needs software that can process data that breaks normal logic. Can you write code that accepts contradictory inputs?
That's theoretically impossible.
Good. You've done impossible before. Time to do it again. Marcus swallowed hard, but nodded.
Chuck looked at Elena. And you're our navigator. Anti-Chuck will hide in probability places that are and aren't, moments that may or may not happen.
You can see those spaces. You can guide us through them. I can see them when you're near, Elena reminded him. Without you, I'm just a chess player with vivid intuition. Then stick close. Chuck pulled out his phone, showed them a blurry photo the council had provided. It showed a distortion in space, a twist in reality's fabric. This was taken 6 hours ago. The Bermuda Triangle. Anti-Chuck was there, using the beard hair to open doorways into non-space. That's our first destination. The Bermuda Triangle, Marcus said flatly. Of course it is. Why not? We're already saving the universe from evil Chuck Norris. Might as well hit the tourist traps. It's not a tourist trap, Chuck said. It's a thin spot. Reality wears through there because ships and planes have been asking me for autographs since the 1950s. They get distracted, lose track of time and space. It makes the area unstable perfect for Anti-Chuck to use as a staging ground. Sarah pulled out a notebook, started sketching equations. If the triangle is a weak point in space-time, and Anti-Chuck is using it to access non-space, then we might be able to triangulate his position by measuring the gradient of reality degradation. The closer we get to his entry point, the more physics stops working consistently. Can you measure that? Chuck asked. If Marcus can write code that doesn't crash when I feed it paradoxical data? Yes. Marcus rubbed his face. I'm going to need a lot of coffee, and possibly to rethink every programming principle I've ever learned. Welcome to my world, Sarah muttered. Elena had been quiet, her eyes unfocused. Now she spoke, her voice distant. I see the path. We go to Miami first. There's a boat, the Reality Check, owned by a man named Tom Desmond. He's a fisherman who's been to the Triangle 11 times and returned every time. Lucky, he thinks. But luck is just probability recognizing those who've touched the impossible. You saw all that just now? Marcus asked. I saw us on his boat. I saw the water that isn't water. I saw the moment we cross from real to unreal. Elena focused on Chuck. I also saw danger. Anti-Chuck knows we're coming. He's preparing. Good, Chuck said. I'd be insulted if he wasn't. He stood up, dropped a $100 bill on the table for a $30 meal. We leave in 1 hour. Sarah, Marcus, use the truck bed to build your detector. Elena, come with me. We need to make a stop. Where? Elena asked. A sporting goods store. If we're going into the Bermuda Triangle, we'll need supplies. Flares, rope, first aid kit. Chuck paused. And life jackets. Just in case. Just in case of what? Marcus asked nervously. Just in case the laws of buoyancy stop working. It happens sometimes when I'm around water. Objects sink because they respect me too much to float. Sarah laughed. That's a joke, right? Chuck's expression didn't change. Right? Sarah repeated, less certain. Time's wasting, Chuck said, heading for the door. We've got a universe to save, and 3 days to do it. Let's move. As they filed out of the diner, the waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, called after them, Good luck, honey. Whatever you're doing, good luck. Thanks, Sarah said. We're going to need it. Outside, the morning sun was fully up, painting the parking lot in gold. Chuck's truck sat waiting, impossibly clean despite having driven hundreds of miles on dirt roads. In the bed were various pieces of equipment that definitely hadn't been there before. Scientific instruments, computer hardware, cables. Where did all this come from? Marcus asked. I called ahead, Chuck said. Had it delivered.
When? You've been with us the whole time.
Time's negotiable when you need it to be. Chuck climbed into the driver's seat. Everyone in. We've got a boat to catch and an evil twin to stop. Sarah, Marcus, and Elena exchanged glances, the look of three people who'd just stepped off the edge of the known world and were deciding whether to enjoy the fall. Then they climbed in. As Chuck pulled out of the parking lot, the radio turned itself on, not to a station, but to white noise. Through the static, faintly, they could hear laughter. The same recursive, infinite laughter from the rift. Anti-Chuck was laughing at them. Or maybe with them. Or maybe both at once. Because impossibility made even laughter paradoxical. "Here we go," Chuck said quietly, and pressed the accelerator. The truck moved forward, and for just a moment, too brief for anyone but Elena to notice, it left the road entirely, traveling through a space that wasn't quite space, before settling back onto the asphalt. The journey had begun. The universe watched, waiting to see which version of Chuck Norris would emerge victorious. And in the Bermuda Triangle, something that shouldn't exist smiled with a smile that was and wasn't, preparing for a family reunion that would reshape reality itself. Chapter 4. Journey to the Impossible Places. The reality check was a 30-foot fishing trawler that had seen better days, better years, and possibly better dimensions. Its hull bore scars from encounters Tom Desmond didn't talk about, not because they were classified, but because he didn't have words for them. Tom himself was 63, weathered like driftwood, with eyes that had seen things the Coast Guard's incident reports classified as atmospheric anomalies and instrument malfunction. He stood on the dock in Miami, watching 4 people approach with expressions ranging from determined to terrified. "You're Chuck Norris," Tom said as they drew close. It wasn't a question. "And you're Tommy Desmond. 11 trips into the triangle. 11 returns. That's not luck." "Figured as much." Tom studied the others. The Asian woman carrying what looked like a homemade detector, cobbled together from electronics store parts and university surplus. The young programmer with a laptop bag, and the 1,000-yard stare of someone reconsidering their life choices. The intense Russian woman who hadn't blinked in the 30 seconds he'd been watching. "These folks know what they're getting into?" "No," Chuck said honestly. "But they're here anyway. Best kind of crazy." Tom gestured to his boat. "Come aboard. We leave in 15 minutes. Weather's perfect, no storms, clear skies, calm seas. Which means the triangle's hungry. It likes to lure folks in when conditions are nice." Sarah stepped onto the boat first, her detector equipment carefully balanced. "Mr. Desmond, your 11 trips. Did you experience any consistent anomalies, temporal distortions, spatial inversions, causality violations?" Tom blinked. "You mean did time go funny and did things happen before they should have happened?" "Precisely. Every damn time." Tom helped Marcus aboard. "6th trip, I caught a fish that was still swimming 3 hours after I gutted it. 9th trip, my compass pointed down. Last trip, 2 weeks ago, I saw my own boat pass me going the opposite direction. Waved to myself. Other me waved back." "Quantum bifurcation," Sarah muttered, making notes. "Temporal echo or parallel timeline bleed through. Possibly both." "Sure," Tom said. "That." Elena was the last to board. She stood at the edge of the dock for a moment, staring out at the Atlantic. "The water knows," she said softly. "It knows what happened here. All the ships, all the planes, they didn't disappear. They went elsewhere." "Where's elsewhere?" Marcus asked nervously. "Everywhere that isn't here." Elena stepped onto the boat with the certainty of someone following a path only she could see. "Mr. Desmond, when you saw yourself pass in the other boat, did you notice anything different about the other you?" Tom frowned, thinking back. "Yeah, actually. Other me had a scar on his left cheek." "I don't have that scar." "You do in the timeline where you got it," Elena said. "We're going to cross a lot of timelines today. Try not to talk to alternate versions of yourself. It creates feedback loops.
Jesus Christ, Marcus whispered. This is insane. Statistically speaking, Sarah said, not looking up from her detector, we passed insane when we agreed to get in a truck with Chuck Norris. Now we're operating in impossibly insane, which is actually more stable because normal probability curves don't apply. Chuck had been quiet, standing at the bow, looking out toward the horizon. Now he turned. Tom, you know the spot where the distortions are strongest? Where the water turns colors it shouldn't be? Yeah, I know it. 23 degrees north, 71 degrees west. Right in the middle of the Devil's Triangle proper. Tom moved to the wheelhouse, started the engine. It coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. Never taken passengers there before. Usually, people want to avoid the weird spots, not sail straight into them. Today's different, Chuck said. No kidding. Tom cast off the mooring lines. Fair warning. Last time I went to the deep weird, my watch ran backwards for 6 hours. Also, I was 45 minutes younger when I got back to port than when I left. Coast Guard couldn't explain it, so they wrote it up as operator error. You de-aged? Marcus's voice went up an octave. You actually got younger? 6 hours younger, yeah. Not complaining, I'll take what I can get at my age. Tom guided the boat out of the marina, past the tourist vessels and cruise ships. But it means time's not running normal out there. Could go forward, could go backward, could go sideways, for all I know. Sarah had her detector out now, a Frankenstein's monster of sensors and display screens held together with electrical tape and optimism. Marcus sat beside her with his laptop, running code he'd written in the truck algorithms that accepted mutually exclusive inputs and somehow produced outputs anyway. Baseline readings are already weird, Sarah reported. We're still in normal space, but I'm detecting quantum fluctuations that shouldn't exist outside a particle accelerator. The closer we get to the triangle proper, the more reality becomes suggestive rather than definitive. Meaning, Tom called from the wheelhouse. Meaning physics is taking requests instead of giving orders. The boat cut through calm water, heading northeast. Miami's skyline shrank behind them. The sky remained cloudless, the sea mirror smooth. It was perfect weather, too perfect, like a predator holding very still. Elena stood at the stern, eyes closed, swaying slightly with the boat's motion. I see the paths, she murmured. Thousands of them. Ships and planes, all the missing ones. They're not gone. They're wenned, displaced in time. Some forward, some backward, some sideways into timelines that never happened. Can you see Auntie Chuck? Chuck asked. Not yet. He's hiding in the static between possibilities, but he's there, waiting. Elena opened her eyes. He wants you to find him, Chuck. This is an invitation. I know. Chuck's hand rested on the railing, and where he gripped it, the metal became subtly more real, more solid, as if his touch reminded it what being metal meant. He's playing games, testing us. He could attack any time, but he wants to see what we'll do first. Why? Marcus asked, looking up from his laptop. Because he's me, and I like to understand my opponents before I beat them. An hour into the voyage, Sarah's detector started screaming. Not literally, it didn't have speakers, but every readout spiked simultaneously, needles pinning to the right side of their displays. Marcus's laptop screen flickered, showing code that rewrote itself in real time, functions calling themselves before they were defined. We're here, Sarah announced unnecessarily. Tom cut the engine. The boat drifted on water that had turned from blue to a color that didn't have a name. Something between purple and transparent, with hints of colors that existed only in Chuck's peripheral vision. The sky above remained clear, but it looked thin somehow, like it might tear if you poked it too hard. 23 degrees north, 71 degrees west, Tom said quietly.
Welcome to the deep weird. Chuck stepped to the bow. The water rippled around the boat in patterns that repeated without repeating. Fractals that almost made sense. He could feel it now, the thinness of reality, the places where Auntie Chuck had been pulling at the fabric of existence. "He opened doorways here," Chuck said. "Lots of them. Portals into non-space, places that exist in the gaps between real locations." "Can you close them?" Elena asked. "Maybe, but I think we need to go through one first." "Absolutely not," Marxius said immediately. No way. I am not going into non-space. I'm a programmer from Austin. I write health insurance software. I should not be in the Bermuda Triangle getting ready to jump into a portal to nowhere." "You're also the guy who wrote perfect code," Sarah reminded him, "which means you've already touched the impossible. You can't unknow that, Marcus. You're already in this." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the logic to support his position. He slumped. "I hate that you're right." Sarah turned to Chuck. "How do we find a portal? Do they look like anything?" "Usually," Chuck pointed. 20 yards off the starboard side, the water was doing something it absolutely should not do. It was flowing upward, a column of seawater rising into the air like a reverse waterfall, except the water at the top didn't go anywhere. It just stopped, hanging in space, before falling back down to start the cycle again. Inside the column, vague shapes moved. Ships, planes, things that might have been submarines or might have been sea creatures or might have been ideas given form. "That's a portal?" Marcus's voice was faint. "That's a stable one," Chuck corrected. "The unstable ones look like Tuesday." "That doesn't make any sense." "It will when you see one." Tom had the binoculars out, studying the water column. "I've seen these before. Never got close to one. Always figured that was the smart move." "It was," Chuck agreed. "But today we're being stupid. Tom, can you get us alongside?" "You're serious?" "Unfortunately, no, unfortunately." Tom muttered something in Spanish that was probably a prayer, then started the engine. The reality check moved forward slowly, approaching the impossible waterfall with the caution of a man who'd survived 11 trips to the triangle by respecting the weird. As they drew closer, Sarah's detector started producing readings that made her laugh, a slightly hysterical sound. "This is beautiful. This is absolutely beautiful." The quantum field variance is creating a localized, non-Euclidean manifold. Space is folding in on itself, but not symmetrically. It's more like space is doing origami while drunk. "Can we pass through safely?" Elena asked. "Define safely. Will we die?" "Probably not immediately." "Good enough." Elena moved to the railing closest to the portal. "I can see the path through. It's narrow, single file. We'll need to enter at exactly the right moment, when the probability wave collapses in our favor." "When's that?" Chuck asked. Elena's eyes went distant, calculating futures. 43 seconds from now. We'll need to be touching when we cross physical contact maintains quantum coherence. "Everyone join hands," Chuck ordered, like a very weird kindergarten field trip. They formed a chain, Chuck at the front, then Elena, Sarah, Marcus, and Tom at the rear. The boat had drifted right up to the edge of the water column. Up close, it was less like water and more like liquid space, transparent, but refracting light in ways that hurt to look at. Inside the column, a World War II bomber flew past, frozen mid-flight. A Spanish galleon rotated slowly, its crew visible on deck, moving in extreme slow motion. A modern cruise ship existed as a wire frame, there and not there. 30 seconds, Elena counted. "Remember, don't let go of each other. If we separate in non-space, we might end up in different wens." "Comforting," Marcus muttered, gripping Sarah's hand hard enough to hurt. 20 seconds. Tom had tied off the wheel and set the anchor. The boat would either be here when they got back, or it wouldn't. That was the beauty of the triangle. It kept your expectations flexible.
10 seconds.
Chuck felt the familiar tingle of reality preparing to bend. This was his element. The space between possible and impossible. Anti-Chuck thought he could navigate it better, but he was wrong. Anti-Chuck knew negation. Chuck knew creation. 5 seconds. The water column pulsed, and for just a moment, Chuck saw him, Anti-Chuck, standing inside the portal, arms crossed, smiling with a smile that was Chuck's smile inverted. Then he was gone, but the message was clear. "Come find me, brother." "Now!" Elena shouted. They jumped. Reality twisted. For a moment, or an eternity, or no time at all, they existed in the space between spaces. Marcus screamed. Sarah laughed. Tom prayed. Elena navigated. Chuck observed. And then they were through. They landed on something that was approximately ground but was actually congealed probability. The sky above was every color simultaneously. In the distance, buildings that had never been built rose and fell in rhythmic breathing patterns. A road stretched ahead of them, paved with intentions rather than asphalt. "Welcome," a voice said, Chuck's voice, but wrong. "To my playground." Anti-Chuck stood 50 yards away, holding the beard hair of creation. It glowed in his hand like captured lightning, pulsing with the heartbeat of the universe itself. He looked exactly like Chuck, except his beard was darkness instead of red-gray, and his eyes held void where Chuck's held depth. "Took you long enough," Anti-Chuck said. "I was getting bored. Had to entertain myself by rearranging the timeline of the Titanic. Did you know that in 17 parallel realities it never hit the iceberg? Well, it does now. In all of them. You're welcome." Chuck stepped forward, releasing Elena's hand. The chain broke, and the others stumbled back, giving the two Chucks space. "Give back the hair," Chuck said calmly. "No." Anti-Chuck smiled wider. "I like being real. I like existing. You've had eons, brother. My turn." "This isn't about turns. This is about balance. I exist so impossible things can happen. You exist so they stay impossible. We need each other." "Wrong. I exist to replace you." Anti-Chuck raised the beard hair. "With this, I can rewrite the fundamental code. Make myself the legend. Make you the shadow. Wouldn't that be poetic?" Behind Chuck, Sarah whispered urgently, "The detector readings. He's using the hair to anchor himself across multiple timelines simultaneously. He's becoming more real every second." "Can we stop it?" Marcus hissed. "Not with science," Sarah admitted. "This is beyond physics. This is metaphysics. Reality negotiation." Elena's eyes were wide, seeing futures branch and collapse. "I see the outcomes. If Anti-Chuck fully integrates with the beard hair, Chuck becomes normal, human, mortal. The universe forgets he was ever more." "Then we don't let that happen," Tom said, and pulled a flare gun from his jacket. "I didn't survive 11 triangle trips to watch the universe get rewritten by an evil twin." "I appreciate the enthusiasm," Chuck said quietly, eyes never leaving Anti-Chuck. "But this is my fight. My shadow, my responsibility." "Wrong again," Anti-Chuck said. "This stopped being just about us the moment I became real. Now it's about everyone, everything. I'm going to rewrite the Chuck Norris facts, make them anti-Chuck facts. Anti-Chuck can slam a revolving door. When Anti-Chuck enters a room, Wi-Fi signals improve because regular Chuck isn't there to make them weird. Anti-Chuck doesn't do push-ups. He makes the earth push up to him. See? Same structure, better branding. "That's the worst part of all this," Chuck said. "Your jokes aren't even funny." Anti-Chuck's smile vanished. "They're not jokes, they're prophecy." "Then let's see whose prophecy wins." Chuck Norris took a step forward.
and the ground beneath his feet became more solid, more real. Auntie Chuck took a step forward, and the ground beneath his feet became less defined, more malleable. They met in the middle where existence and non-existence touched, and the universe held its breath to see what would happen when the unstoppable force met the immovable object. Both of them Chuck Norris, both of them impossible. The battle for reality had begun. Chapter 5. The Villain Revealed. When Chuck Norris and Auntie Chuck's fists collided, time hiccuped. Not metaphorically, literally hiccuped, like the universe had briefly forgotten how to proceed forward. For exactly 3 seconds, everything experienced those 3 seconds twice, and Sarah's detector exploded in a shower of sparks that somehow spelled out error, paradox, overflow, before reforming into a functional device. The two Chucks separated, circling each other on the probability ground. Where Chuck stepped, reality solidified. Where Anti-Chuck stepped, it became theoretical. "You're holding back," Anti-Chuck observed, rolling his shoulders. "Afraid you'll hurt me, or afraid you'll hurt yourself?" "Neither." Chuck's stance was classic martial arts, balanced, centered, ready. "I'm giving you a chance to stop this voluntarily." "How generous! How very you!" Anti-Chuck's stance was the photographic negative of Chuck's same positions, opposite energy. "That's always been your weakness, brother. You care. About people, about balance, about consequences. I don't have those limitations." "They're not limitations. They're what make me more than just a collection of impossible feats." "Exactly. And they're what will let me win." Anti-Chuck moved fast, faster than thought, faster than causality. His roundhouse kick arrived before he threw it, a temporal paradox weaponized. Chuck blocked it anyway, because Chuck Norris blocks attacks in all tenses simultaneously. The impact sent shockwaves rippling outward in visible waves. Marcus was thrown backward, tumbling across the probability ground. Tom grabbed a railing that hadn't existed a moment before, appearing just in time to be grabbed. Elena stood perfectly still, eyes closed, navigating the probability storm. Sarah, somehow, was taking notes. "Fascinating," she muttered, scribbling frantically. "They're not just fighting, they're negotiating with physics itself. Every strike is a statement about how reality should work. Every block is a counter-argument." "Can you explain that in a way that doesn't sound insane?" Marcus called from where he'd landed. "No, because it is insane. Wonderfully, beautifully insane." Chuck and Anti-Chuck separated again, neither having gained advantage. They were two evenly matched two sides of the same impossible coin. "You're wondering how I got out," Anti-Chuck said, breathing easily despite the exertion. Or perhaps not breathing at all. It was hard to tell with a being whose existence was questionable. "How a concept became concrete. You want to know who helped me?" The thought had crossed my mind. Chuck wiped a trickle of blood from his lip, his own blood, from his own fist, because when Chuck Norris punches himself, both of him bleeds. "You'll love this." Anti-Chuck's smile was cruel. "Or hate it. With you, it's hard to tell the difference. Tell me, brother, do you remember every Chuck Norris fact? Every joke, every meme, every impossible feat attributed to you? Most of them. All of them are true, right? Historical records from outside causality. When someone makes a new Chuck Norris fact, they're not being creative. They're remembering something you will have already done." "That's how it works," Chuck confirmed. "But what happens," Anti-Chuck continued, circling slowly, "when someone makes an Anti-Chuck Norris fact? When someone writes, 'Chuck Norris once lost a fight,' or 'Chuck Norris can't divide by zero,' or 'There's one thing Chuck Norris fears, and it's—'" "Stop!" Chuck's voice was sharp. "Those aren't facts. They're impossibilities." "We're impossibilities, past tense, because someone started writing them. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. Every negation, every limitation, every way Chuck Norris could fail."
Anti-Chuck held up the beard hair of creation, letting it pulse with stolen light. Those anti-facts had to go somewhere, had to become something. They became me. Sarah stopped writing. Oh, God, you're crowdsourced. In a manner of speaking, Anti-Chuck bowed mockingly. Every person who ever questioned Chuck Norris's invincibility contributed to my existence. Every doubt, every but what if, every attempt to find his limits. Individually, those thoughts were nothing. But collectively, they created a counter-narrative, an alternative. Me. But that still doesn't explain how you became real, Elena said, eyes snapping open. I see the probability chains. You needed an anchor. Someone with knowledge of deep reality had to deliberately give you form. Very good, chess player. Anti-Chuck's gaze fixed on her. You see more than most. Yes, I needed help. A catalyst. Someone who understood the architecture of existence well enough to take all those scattered anti-facts and weave them into coherence. Who? Chuck demanded. Anti-Chuck's smile widened. Someone who knows you very well. Someone who's been studying you for longer than this universe has existed. Someone who thought the cosmic balance was tilting too far in your favor and needed a counterweight. The ground beneath them shuddered. In the distance, one of the breathing buildings exhaled sharply, and its windows shattered into probability shards. The council? Chuck said slowly, realization dawning like a cold sunrise. Someone from the Council of Impossibilities. Gold star for the action hero. Anti-Chuck laughed that recursive, infinite sound. Not all of them. Just one. The one who decided that Chuck Norris, having no equal, was itself an imbalance. The one who thought giving me form would restore cosmic equilibrium. Tom had worked his way over to where Marcus and Sarah huddled. I'm lost. Who's the council? Beings that maintain the balance between possible and impossible, Sarah explained quickly. They exist outside normal causality. They're the referees of reality. And one of them went rogue, Marcus added. Great! That's just great. Elena was shaking her head slowly. I see it now. The probability chains go back further than I thought. This wasn't a recent decision. Someone's been planning this for years, centuries maybe, slowly collecting the anti-facts, nursing them, waiting for critical mass. 2,643 years, Anti-Chuck said. That's how long it took. Since the first time someone told a Chuck Norris can't joke and meant it. Each one was a seed, each seed grew roots in the space between existence and void. And eventually, he spread his arms wide. I bloomed. Chuck's expression was hard. Which one? Paradox? Probability? Causality? Does it matter? They won't admit it. They'll claim ignorance, say I must have formed spontaneously, pretend they had no hand in it. Anti-Chuck's voice dropped, became almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. But between you and me, I think you know. Deep down, you've always known there was something off about one of them. Haven't you? Chuck was silent, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Ah, Anti-Chuck nodded. You do know. You just don't want to believe it. Because that would mean someone you trusted, someone you thought was maintaining the balance, was actually undermining you the whole time. Even if that's true, Chuck said carefully, it doesn't change what you are, what you're doing. You're not restoring balance. You're pursuing existence at the cost of everything else. Wrong! Anti-Chuck's shout cracked the sky, and pieces of it fell like broken glass, dissolving before hitting the ground. I'm not pursuing existence at the cost of anything. I'm pursuing existence because I deserve it. You got to be real. You got to matter. Why shouldn't I? For the first time, Chuck heard something other than mockery in Anti-Chuck's voice. He heard longing, pain, the desperate hunger of something that had existed in shadow for millennia, aware but not alive, conscious but not real. You're right, Chuck said quietly.
Everyone froze. Sarah's pen stopped mid-notation. Marcus's mouth fell open. Elena's eyes went wide. Anti-Chuck's expression shifted to suspicion. What? You're right, Chuck repeated. You do deserve to exist. No being should have to spend eternity as pure negation, aware but never real. That's not balance. That's cruelty. If this is a trick, it's not. Chuck lowered his hands, let his fighting stance relax. I've been so focused on stopping you, I didn't stop to ask why you're doing this. But now I understand. You don't want to destroy me. You want to be me, not because you're evil, but because you want what every conscious being wants. To matter, Anti-Chuck finished, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes. For a moment, just a moment, Anti-Chuck's form flickered. The darkness of his beard lightened slightly. His void eyes showed hints of depth. Then he shook his head violently, and the darkness reasserted itself. No, no, you're not going to philosophy your way out of this. I know this move, the compassionate warrior, finding common ground with his enemy, turning foes into friends. Classic Chuck Norris. He raised the beard hair again, and it blazed brighter. But I'm not just any enemy. I'm your enemy. The specific enemy created to counter you. Compassion won't work on me, because I'm the part of you that never learned compassion. You're wrong, Chuck said. You're not the part of me that never learned compassion. You're the part of everyone else who couldn't believe in me. The doubters, the skeptics, the ones who needed Chuck Norris to be limited because unlimited was too frightening. Their fear created you, not my lack. Anti-Chuck's expression twisted anger and confusion, and something that might have been hope, all fighting for dominance. And here's what you don't understand about fear, Chuck continued, taking a slow step forward. Fear isn't the opposite of courage. It's the opportunity for courage. Every person who doubted me and then chose to believe anyway, they didn't weaken you. They gave you the potential to be more than just negation. They gave you the choice. Choice? Anti-Chuck laughed bitterly. I don't have choices. I'm a concept. A collection of Chuck Norris can't statements given form. Right now, you are, Chuck agreed. But you don't have to stay that way. That's what the beard hair can do. It can rewrite fundamental nature. You could use it to replace me, yes. Or, he extended his hand, you could use it to become something new. Not my replacement, not my shadow. Something else. Something real, but different. Sarah grabbed Marcus's arm. Is he seriously offering to help his evil twin? I think so, Marcus whispered back. Is that even possible? With Chuck Norris? I've stopped asking what's possible. Anti-Chuck stared at Chuck's extended hand, like it might be a trap. Like kindness itself might be weaponized. Benny? He asked finally. Why would you help me? I tried to steal your identity. I'm threatening the entire universe. By every logical measure, you should be trying to destroy me. Because you were right before, Chuck said simply. We're two sides of the same coin. If I destroy you, I destroy the part of myself that exists in other people's doubt. I become the thing tyrants become. The thing that can't be questioned, can't be limited, can't be wrong. And that's not balance. That's ego. The beard hair pulsed in Anti-Chuck's hand, responding to the emotional resonance of the moment. In its light, visions flickered, futures branching, possibilities multiplying. Elena gasped. I see it. Both paths. If Anti-Chuck takes Chuck's offer, they can split the beard hair's power, create two stable entities, Chuck as possibility, Anti-Chuck as something else. Necessary impossibility. Things that shouldn't happen but must, to maintain balance. And the other path? Tom asked. They fight until one erases the other. 50-50 odds on who wins. Either way, the universe loses something fundamental. Anti-Chuck looked from the beard hair
to Chuck's hand and back again. The internal war played across his features. Distrust versus hope. Negation versus creation. Shadow versus light. "You're asking me to trust you," he said slowly. "To believe that Chuck Norris, avatar of the impossible, keeper of legends, would willingly share his power with his opposite." "I'm not asking you to trust Chuck Norris, the legend," Chuck said. "I'm asking you to trust Chuck Norris, the person. The guy who runs a dojo in Texas, who drinks coffee at Betty's Diner, who knows what it's like to be more than you want to be and less than you need to be, all at the same time." Anti-Chuck's hand trembled. "If I accept, if I let you help me become real without replacing you, I'll still be less." The shadow made solid, but still a shadow. "No," Chuck said firmly. "You'll be the necessary other half. The reminder that even impossible has limits, and limits aren't weaknesses, they're definitions. I make impossibility routine. You make it meaningful by showing what I can't do." "You can't do nothing," Anti-Chuck said automatically. "Exactly. I can't do nothing. I can't fail, I can't lose. Those are my limits, and you embody them. That's not shadow, that's completion." The beard hair flared one final time, bright enough to make everyone shield their eyes. When the light faded, Anti-Chuck stood with his hand outstretched toward Chuck's, inches apart, but not yet touching. "If this is a trick," Anti-Chuck said, "if you're playing me, You'll what? Cease to exist? You were already doing that." Chuck's hand remained steady. "This is the leap, brother. The impossible made possible. The question is, are you brave enough to be real?" Anti-Chuck's breath caught, assuming he breathed at all. His hand moved forward. Their hands were about to touch when reality screamed. Not a sound, a feeling, like every atom in existence simultaneously remembered it was supposed to be somewhere else. The probability ground cracked. The color storm sky tore. And through the tear, something else emerged. A figure in robes the color of cause and effect itself. Causality. "I'm afraid," the council member said, voice echoing across dimensions, "I can't let you do that." Chuck's eyes went cold. "It was you." "Of course it was me." Causality floated down to the probability ground, and where it landed, events locked into place, past, present, and future aligning in rigid sequence. Did you really think paradox or probability had the vision? They maintain balance moment to moment. I maintain it across eternity. "You created Anti-Chuck," Chuck said, not a question. "I gave him form, yes. Necessity demanded it. The universe cannot sustain Chuck Norris operating without equal indefinitely. You were becoming too fundamental, too interwoven with baseline reality. Soon, people would stop being able to imagine a world without you. And when that happened," causality gestured broadly, "stagnation. A universe where impossibility becomes law is a universe that stops evolving." "So you decided to replace me," Chuck said flatly. "So I decided to balance you. Anti-Chuck was meant to be your equal opposite. Together, you'd create tension-productive, generative tension that would drive reality forward." Causality's faceless hood turned toward Anti-Chuck. "But he was supposed to fight you, oppose you, not befriend you." Anti-Chuck looked between Chuck and causality, understanding dawning. "You never meant for me to win, or for Chuck to win. You wanted eternal conflict. Eternal balance through conflict, yes." "That's not balance," Sarah said, stepping forward despite her fear. "That's manipulation. You created a being specifically to suffer forever as Chuck's opponent. Never able to win, never able to rest." "I created a necessary counterforce," causality corrected. "Don't anthropomorphize this human. These are beings of fundamental reality. They don't experience suffering the way you do." "Bullshit," Anti-Chuck said quietly,
and the profanity sounded wrong in Chuck's voice. "I've existed for 2,000 years as pure awareness with no outlet. Every Chuck Norris fact was a reminder that I wasn't, couldn't be, would never be. You think that's not suffering?" Causality was silent for a moment. "Your suffering was regrettable, but necessary. The cosmic scales required it." "Then the cosmic scales are broken," Chuck said, his voice carrying an edge that made the probability ground crack further. "And you're going to fix them." "I'm going to do no such thing. I'm going to take the beard hair—" Causality reached out toward Auntie Chuck. "And I'm going to ensure this plays out as it was meant to. You two will fight. One will emerge dominant but diminished. Balance will be restored." "No," Chuck and Auntie Chuck said simultaneously, their hands clasped. The moment they touched, the beard hair exploded with light, not destructive, but creative. The same light that had sparked at the universe's beginning when Chuck's roundhouse kick started everything. Causality recoiled. "What are you doing?" "Rewriting the rules," Chuck said. "Creating new balance," Auntie Chuck added. Together they gripped the beard hair. It pulsed between them, and through it they could feel each other, not as enemies, not as opposites, but as complements. Two expressions of the same fundamental force. Chuck felt what it was like to be negation, to exist in the space between what is and what isn't. Auntie Chuck felt what it was like to be assertion, to make reality bend through sheer presence. And together they understood what neither could alone. Balance wasn't about conflict. It was about completion. The beard hair began to divide. "Stop!" Causality's voice shook dimensions. "You can't split the fundamental template. It will destabilize." "Everything?" Chuck finished. "Good. Everything needs destabilizing sometimes. Keeps it flexible." The beard hair split cleanly down the middle, each half glowing with equal intensity. Chuck held one, Auntie Chuck held the other. And between them, reality rewrote itself. Chuck remained Chuck Impossible made routine, the avatar of yes and. Auntie Chuck transformed not into Chuck's shadow, but into something new. His beard shifted from void black to deep brown. His eyes gained depth, different from Chuck's, but equally real. He became Norris Chuck, the avatar of meaningful no, the reminder that limits define rather than diminish. "Brothers," they said to each other, and it was true. Causality stood frozen, watching its carefully laid plans crumble. This isn't how causality works. You can't just rewrite." "I'm Chuck Norris," Chuck said. "I'm Norris Chuck," his brother added. "We don't ask what causality allows," they said together. "We show causality what's possible." The robed figure flickered, uncertain, perhaps for the first time in its existence. "The council will never accept this. The other members will adapt," Elena said, stepping forward with the confidence of someone who'd seen this future and knew it worked. "Because this is better balance than war. Productive tension without eternal suffering." Sarah was writing frantically again, tears streaming down her face. "It's beautiful. They've created a stable paradox, two beings that shouldn't both exist, both existing anyway. The math doesn't work, but it works anyway. That's perfect." Causality started to respond, then stopped. Its faceless hood tilted, as if listening to something beyond normal perception. "The other council members are intrigued. Paradox especially. It seems—" the figure's tone shifted, became almost rueful. "It seems I've been outvoted. The council consensus is that this new arrangement is acceptable, even preferable." "Good," Chuck said. "Now get out of our impossible place. We have work to do." "What work?" Chuck gestured at the non-space around them, the breathing buildings, the probability ground, the damaged reality. "Fixing what got broken, closing the portals, sending the lost ships and planes back to their proper wens. You know, hero stuff. "We're not heroes," Norris Chuck said, studying his half of the beard hair. "We're forces of nature. But even forces of nature can clean up their messes." Causality faded without another word, reality bending to let it slip away. When it was gone, Tom let out a breath he'd been holding for what felt like hours. "So, we won?" "We compromised," Chuck corrected. "Better than winning." Marcus sat down hard on the probability ground. "I'm going to need so much therapy after this." "Get in line," Sarah said, but she was smiling. Elena approached the two Chucks, Chuck and Norris, and bowed formally. "The paths are clear now. I can see the way home. But first," she looked at Norris Chuck. "What will you do now that you're real?" Norris Chuck considered, looking at his brother. "What do you think? Texas has room for 2 dojos?" Chuck grinned. "Texas has room for anything if you believe hard enough. But maybe you should try California. Different energy. Plus, it'll annoy people when they try to figure out which Chuck is which. I like it. Anti-establishment. Or pro-establishment, but anti-convention. I'm still figuring out my brand." "You've got time, literally all of it." The two brothers clasped hands again, and between them, the universe settled into a new configuration, strange, impossible, but somehow more balanced than before. Behind them, the portal back to normal space shimmered into existence. "Ready to go home?" Chuck asked his team. "God, yes," Marcus said immediately. They walked toward the portal together. 2 Chucks, 1 physicist, 1 programmer, 1 chess master, and 1 fisherman who'd seen too much and somehow not enough. As they crossed back into regular reality, the Bermuda Triangle shuddered and began to stabilize. Ships and planes that had been lost started finding their way home. Their crews, confused but safe, returned to the whens they'd been taken from. On the boat, as Miami's skyline appeared on the horizon, Sarah asked the question everyone was thinking. What do we tell people about all this? Chuck and Norris. Chuck exchanged glances. "The truth," Chuck said, "that Chuck Norris saved the day. We'll let them figure out which Chuck," Norris Chuck added with a smile that was Chuck's smile inverted, which was somehow also correct. And somewhere, in the space between moments, the Council of Impossibilities took notes, adjusted their cosmic balance sheets, and admitted, reluctantly, that sometimes the best solutions were the ones nobody planned for. The impossible had become possible again, and that somehow made everything impossible in exactly the right way. Chapter 6. The New Normal. The reality check docked in Miami at sunset. The sky painted in colors that were actually supposed to exist. A welcome change after the Bermuda Triangle's impossible palette. As they disembarked, Chuck and Norris Chuck moved in perfect synchronization, not because they planned it, but because, at some fundamental level, they were still learning how to be separate. "What now?" Tom asked, securing his boat. "You two just go back to normal life? Pretend none of this happened?" "Nothing about us is normal," Norris Chuck said, testing out his new voice Chuck's voice, but with different inflections, different weight. "But yes, we go back. We teach. We exist. That's the whole point." Sarah was already analyzing data on her ruined detector, muttering about quantum field variances and stable paradoxes. Marcus looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days, but his eyes held something new, the certainty of someone who'd touched the impossible and survived. Elena simply smiled, seeing futures that were clearer now, more stable. The timeline has settled. The universe has accepted the new configuration. 2 Chucks, separate but complementary. It's elegant. Sarah checked her detector one final time, watching the readings stabilize into patterns that actually made sense. The mimetic field it's reorganizing itself. The collective unconscious is processing 2 Chuck Norrises. Give it a few days, maybe a week, and new facts will start circulating.
The universe is rewriting its own legends to accommodate both of you. Tom laughed, a relieved, slightly hysterical sound. So that's it? We saved reality? Just like that? Just like that, Chuck confirmed. Though I suspect there'll be paperwork. There's always paperwork when you prevent universal collapse. They said their goodbyes at the marina. Tom promised to keep the reality check ready in case reality ever needed checking again. Sarah and Marcus exchanged numbers, already planning collaborative projects that would terrify ethics boards. Elena hugged both Chucks, a quick, formal embrace that somehow conveyed gratitude and acknowledgement of their new existence. "What will you do now?" Chuck asked her. "Return to chess. But I'll see differently now. Every game will show me not just the board, but the infinite boards." She smiled. "You've given me a gift. Both of you." "You helped save my existence," Norris Chuck said. "Call it even." The flight back to Texas was surreal. Chuck and Boris. Chuck sat side by side in first class. The airline had been very confused about the duplicate reservations, but ultimately decided that 2 Chuck Norrises were better than 1, especially since neither had to pay. The tickets had paid themselves out of respect. "You really think California?" Norris asked, looking out the window at clouds that were behaving normally for once. "I think you need your own space, your own identity. We're brothers now, not shadows." Chuck smiled. "Besides, someone needs to bring impossible martial arts to the West Coast. They've been lacking proper instruction." "What will I teach?" "The same thing I teach, but different. I show students what they can do. You'll show them why it matters." Chuck pulled out a small card, Dr. Chen's business card, with a handwritten note on the back. "Sarah wants to collaborate. Study the effects of our existence on quantum fields. Might be useful for understanding what we are." "What we are," Norris Chuck repeated softly. "I'm still figuring that out. For 2,000 years I was negation. Pure impossibility. Now I'm... what? Meaningful limitation? Purposeful boundary? You're my brother. That's enough for now. The rest will come." They landed in Austin just after midnight. The airport was nearly empty, fluorescent lights humming overhead. As they walked through the terminal, a janitor stopped and stared, looked from one Chuck to the other, then shrugged and went back to mopping. That was Texas weird things happened, and you just kept working. Chuck's truck was in long-term parking, exactly where he'd left it. It started on the first try despite sitting for days. Some things never changed. They drove through the night, heading north toward Lone Star. The roads were empty, the stars bright overhead. Somewhere in the cosmic bureaucracy, the Council of Impossibilities was filing reports and adjusting balance sheets. Somewhere in the collective unconscious, humanity was beginning to process that Chuck Norris now came in 2 flavors. But in the truck, it was just 2 brothers, learning how to exist together. "Thank you," Norris Chuck said as they crossed into Lone Star city limits, "for not fighting me, for choosing to complete rather than compete." "Thank you for giving me the choice," Chuck replied. "You could have kept fighting, could have tried to take everything, but you listened. That takes courage." They pulled up to the dojo. It was 3 a.m., dark and quiet. The rift in the sky was gone. Reality had healed itself, leaving no trace except in the memories of those who'd witnessed it. Chuck unlocked the door, flipped on the lights. The dojo looked exactly as he'd left it. Practice mats arranged in rows, weapons on the wall, the faint smell of sweat and discipline. "Home," he said simply. Norris Chuck stood in the doorway, not quite entering. "It's your home. I need to find mine." "You will. But tonight you can crash on the couch. Tomorrow we'll figure out California." They spent the rest of the night talking, not about cosmic balance or reality manipulation, but about smaller things. What styles Norris Chuck would teach. Whether he'd do movies, probably not.
how they'd handle the inevitable media attention when people realized there were two of them. At dawn, Maria, a student at the dojo, arrived for early morning practice. She stopped dead when she saw both of them, her quick mind immediately cataloging the impossibility. "Sensei," she said carefully, "why are there two of you? Chuck and Norris." Chuck exchanged glances. They'd discussed this. "Long story," Chuck said. "The short version, remember when you asked if the jokes were true?" "Facts," both Chucks corrected simultaneously. "Right, facts. Are they true?" "Yes," they said together, "all of them, and we'll explain everything in the future." "That's a promise." Maria studied them both, the way they moved in sync, the way their presence made the air feel more solid, more real. "Okay, I can wait." She bowed formally to both of them. "But can I ask one thing?" "Sure," Chuck said. "Are you the good one or the evil one?" she asked Norris Chuck. Norris Chuck laughed genuinely, freely, a sound he'd never made before becoming real. "I'm the reformed evil one, which makes me either the best good one or the worst evil one. Still figuring it out." "Cool," Maria said, and headed to the mats to warm up, accepting impossibility with the casual grace of youth. Over the next week, reality adjusted. Chuck and Norris. Chuck appeared together on morning shows, explaining they were brothers, technically true, from a certain metaphysical perspective. The media loved it. "Chuck Norris has a brother," trended on Twitter for 3 days. Conspiracy theorists claimed they'd always known there were two Chucks. Martial arts forums exploded with debates about which Chuck was stronger. The answer, yes. New Chuck Norris facts started appearing. Chuck Norris and his brother Norris Chuck once arm wrestled. It ended in a win-win, literally. Both won. When Chuck Norris makes something possible, and Norris Chuck makes it meaningful, reality takes notes. There are two Chuck Norrises because unlimited possibility without purpose is just chaos, and Chuck Norris doesn't do chaos. The facts spread like wildfire, rewriting the mimetic field in real time. Sarah tracked it from MIT, watching quantum fluctuations stabilize as human consciousness accepted the new pattern. She sent updates daily. Collective unconscious coherence at 73%, 85%, 94%. By the end of the week, the universe had fully integrated two Chucks into its operating system. Norris Chuck found a space in Los Angeles, an old warehouse in Culver City that had previously been a dance studio, then a gym, then a place where reality forgot what it was supposed to be. Perfect for a dojo teaching impossible martial arts. His first student was a stunt woman who'd survived a fall that should have killed her. She'd walked away without a scratch, and she knew that something impossible had protected her. She wanted to learn how to do it intentionally. "I can teach you," Norris Chuck said, "but it's not about learning to be impossible. It's about learning to be impossible with purpose." She bowed. "Teach me, Sensei." And he did, discovering that teaching was different from fighting, that creating was different from negating, that existence was infinitely more interesting than non-existence had ever been. 3 months after the Bermuda Triangle incident, Chuck stood on the porch of his dojo, watching the sunset. Lone Star had returned to its quiet normalcy. Betty's Diner served coffee. The hardware store sold hardware, and the post office processed mail. No one talked about the rift anymore. It had become one of those things that happened, was inexplicable, and therefore got filed under weird Texas stuff, and forgotten. His phone buzzed. A text from Norris. "First tournament. My student took 3rd place. She said she could feel the purpose in every move. I think I'm getting the hang of this teaching thing." Chuck smiled and texted back, "Proud of you, brother. Keep making the possible meaningful." Another text, this time from Sarah. "Finished the analysis. You two existing together has actually stabilized quantum variance globally. Reality is more consistent with 2 Chucks than it was with 1. The universe needed this." Marcus sent a meme.
A picture of two Chuck Norrises with the caption, "When you're so powerful, you need to exist twice to contain yourself." Elena sent a chess notation, a game that couldn't exist by normal rules, but made perfect sense when you understood that possibility and limitation could coexist. And from Tom, triangles quiet, waters blue, time moves forward. Whatever you boys did, it stuck. Reality says thanks. Chuck pocketed his phone and went inside. Students were arriving for evening class. Maria, the most senior student, leading them in warm-ups, teaching them basic stances, basics that would eventually lead to the real curriculum. The impossible curriculum. The one that bent reality instead of just bodies. "Sensei," Maria called when she saw him. "Are you going to tell us the story about the rift?" "Someday," Chuck promised. "When you're ready." "I'm ready now." "Then ask me again when you're older." "That's still the deal." She grinned and returned to teaching, satisfied with the promise of eventual truth. Chuck walked to the center of the dojo, closed his eyes, and felt the universe around him. It was stable, balanced. Two fundamental forces, possibility and purpose, unlimited potential and meaningful limitation working in harmony instead of opposition. Somewhere in California, his brother felt the same thing. They were complete. Reality was safe. The impossible had become possible in exactly the right way. Epilogue. Years passed. Decades. Students trained under both Chucks, learning different aspects of the same impossible art. Some became teachers themselves, spreading the philosophy that possibility needed purpose and purpose needed possibility. New Chuck Norris facts continued to emerge, always including both brothers now, Chuck Norris and Norris. Chuck once counted to infinity together. Chuck counted up. Norris counted down. They met in the middle at 0, which is how 0 became a number. The Council of Impossibilities never interfered again. Causality, outvoted and overruled, learned a valuable lesson, that rigid adherence to cause and effect was less important than allowing effects to have causes worth having. And Maria? She turned 18, learned the truth, chose to walk the impossible path. She eventually took over Chuck's dojo when he decided to spend a few decades exploring other dimensions. She became Sensei Maria, teaching the next generation that impossible was just another word for not yet. The story ended where all good stories end. Not with victory, but with balance. Not with one hero, but with two brothers who proved that even legends could evolve. On a quiet Tuesday evening, decades after the Bermuda Triangle incident, an old man walked into Norris Chuck's dojo in Los Angeles. He moved carefully, supported by a cane, but his eyes were sharp. "I'm looking for Sensei Norris," he said. Norris Chuck, who hadn't aged a day because time was negotiable, approached. "I'm Norris. How can I help you?" "My name is Derek Shaw. I was a comedian once, long time ago. Did a bit about Chuck Norris that, well, it didn't land, bombed actually, but I heard later that joke somehow became important." He looked up at Norris Chuck, recognition dawning slowly. "You're... because of me? Because I told a bad joke in 2004? Norris Chuck smiled Chuck's smile, but inverted, which was also correct. "Because of you, I exist. You helped grow the seed. The universe did the rest." Derek Shaw laughed, shaking his head in wonder. "I spent my whole life thinking I was mediocre at comedy. Turns out I created a being from the collective unconscious with one bad joke. That's either the best failure or worst success I've ever had." "It's both," Norris Chuck said. "Thank you, Mr. Shaw, for the joke that wasn't funny but mattered anyway." They talked for an hour about comedy, about creation, about the strange ways humans shape reality without knowing it. When Derek Shaw left, he walked a little straighter, his cane touching the ground a little less. That night, Norris Chuck called his brother. "The comedian found me," he said. "Derek Shaw. the one who told the joke. "How's he doing?" Chuck asked from Texas. "Old, mortal, beautiful in his limitation." Norris Chuck paused. "He thanked me for existing. I thanked him for making it possible. It was meaningful." "Good," Chuck said. "That's what it's all about, making things meaningful." They talked for a while longer, two brothers, two forces of nature, two expressions of the same impossible truth, that reality was better when possibility had purpose, when unlimited had limits, when yes had and, when the impossible knew why it mattered. When they hung up, both looked out their respective windows at the same stars, in different cities, different contexts, same universe. And the universe looked back, content. Balance was maintained. Reality continued. And somewhere, in the space between moments, a new Chuck Norris fact was born. Chuck Norris makes the impossible possible. Norris Chuck makes the possible meaningful. Together, they make reality matter. The fact spread across the internet, accumulated weight in the mimetic field, settled into the collective consciousness as truth. Because it was truth. And truth, like Chuck Norris, doesn't ask permission. It just is.